Welcome back to the JavaScript for Beginners course. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover Boolean logic, and I'm also going to give you a JavaScript code example. Well, the logical operators consist of AND, OR, and NOT notations. These make up the Boolean logic. Let's look into a simple example. Suppose we have two statements, A and B. Statement A says that Nick is a software engineer, and statement B says that Nick earns £100,000 a year. These two statements can be represented as Boolean variables, which means that both of them can be either true or false independently. So Nick can be or not be a software engineer, and he can earn or not earn £100,000 a year. But how do we represent this in terms of logical operations? You can imagine a table with all the possible combinations of both statements, which in this case, with two statements, that would be 4 potential outcomes. The AND operator will only return true if both statements are true. In case if even one of them is false, that would make the whole operation false. So what we can see from this matrix table is that both statements A and B are true, then the logical AND operation would return true no matter how many variables we use. All of them must be true. The OR operator, on the other hand, only cares about if one of the statements is true. So in this case, the matrix table would flip around and look like this. The only case where the logical OR operation will return false in this case is where both statements A and B are false. In general, for a logical OR operation, if any of the variables you pass is a truthy value, then the whole operation is true. And finally, the NOT logical operator simply exists to invert the true or false values. It applies on a single Boolean value at a time, and its only purpose is to turn a true value to false and a false value to true. Now let's take a look at some JavaScript code to understand the example. Let's suppose we represent the two statements A and B as Boolean values, so I'll create a variable called A and make it equal to true. And I'm going to make another variable called B and make it also true. So in this case, as we saw for the AND operator, if we use the AND operator, such as A && B, this is going to return true. However, if either one of those values, for example B, was false, and then we try to evaluate the expression again, this would return false, because as I've mentioned, for the logical AND operations, both statements have always got to be true. And it's also important to know that it doesn't matter how many variables you have. I can introduce a variable C, then I can make true, and I can type A and B and C, and it will still be false because the variable B has been changed to false. All of the variables must be true for an AND operation to result into true. And I can show it to you right now. If I change B to true again and type A and B and C, that is going to return true. Now let's take a look at the OR operation. So in this case, we can use the double lines. So I'm going to do A or B. It's going to be true. Now, if I changed A to be false, then I can compare A and B statements together again, and it's going to be true again. Because for the logical OR operators, the only thing that matters is that as long as just one value is true, the whole operation will return true. Now, for the case that you want the OR operation to return false, all of the variables inside have to be false. So if I change A to false, and I change B to false, and then I do the operation A or B, that is then going to be returned to false. And finally, in regards to the NOT operator, as mentioned, its purpose is to invert a true or false value. So let's take a look at what A returns. A returns false, and if I type the exclamation mark, which is the notation for the NOT operation, and I type A, the opposite of false is true. And likewise, if we set B to true and we do not B, then it's going to return false. And finally, you can mix operators to evaluate a more complex expression. For example, let's say that A and B must be true if we invert the expression. So initially, A and B is false. If I remove the exclamation mark, you'll see it here. It's false, but if I add the exclamation mark at the front, it's going to flip the value from false to true. And that is all you need to know about the Boolean logic. It's some basic introduction into it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.